Discovering the Underground Railroad with Professor J. Eric Robinson next on City Corner. Hi, I'm Sarah Thompson, and welcome to City Corner. It's Black History Month when we honor the past, no matter how celebratory or how difficult. And so today we're speaking with a historian who has been leading Underground Railroad tours for more than 25 years. And so now I have the pleasure of being joined by Professor J. Eric Robinson. He is an assistant professor of history at the University of Health Sciences and Pharmacy in St. Louis, formerly the St. Louis College of Pharmacy. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to join me today.
My pleasure to be with you, Ms. Thompson. I would like to say hello to my former colleague and your current colleague. I used to broadcast on WBGZ with him, Steve Potter, who's now running for alderman in Alton. I wish him well.
That's correct. That's correct. And I know when Steve sees the show, I'm not sure how he'll feel about the fact that I snagged you for this interview. So fingers crossed with that. I
hate to imagine his reaction. I'm glad I'm not there.
It should be okay. There's so much that I want to talk about with you, and I know with the show we have such limited time, but I want to start things off. I know we're going to get into some real have a historical dive with some figures and places, but first to get into how the tours started for you, because you have people from all over the region, the country, and even other continents who have come specifically to Alton, to the St. Louis region, to have your tours. How did this all begin for you as a history professor?
Well, it's fortuitous that the two of us know Steve Potter, because it was my relationship with our former mutual employer, WBGC and Metroplex Communications, that got me into these tours. I was not at all interested in Underground Railroad, and I was talked into doing these tours by some kind little old ladies that I interviewed for my program Eavesdropping, which I started back in 1993. And they thought that I did a pretty good job, and I know they talked to my mother, and because Joyce had told them, probably put me in a position where I can't say I'll think about it. Because usually when I say I'll think about it, that means no, I'm not going to do it. And so they called me to a meeting, and the meeting was on heritage tourism with a representative from what was then the Greater Alton Convention and Visitors Bureau, now Rivers and Routes Convention and Visitors Bureau. They were talking about heritage tourism for a day-long tour, and I was sitting there and I was listening to it. I thought I was there as a member of the board of directors of the Alton Museum of History and Art, just to observe. And at the end of the meeting, the chair of the meeting turned to me and said, "And you're going to do the Alton tour." And I think that had been planned, obviously. And I had no chance to say, "Let me think about it." I had to say yes, and had no choice but to say yes. And the thing that really I had to stop to think about was, or carefully consider, was that that first tour was on October 7th, 1995. That was the day before my 30th birthday. And so I thought, well, that's one heck of a way to spend your 30th birthday. And then I walked onto the motor coach to do the tour, and on the tour were my mother, my grandmother, my Sunday school teachers, their cousins, their friends, Miss Dam, Mr. Dam, and the whole damn family. And so I knew that if I didn't do a decent job in those 2 hours, somebody, most likely my mother, would stand up, grab the microphone from me and say, "Sit down, you're doing it all wrong." But I turned out to do a decent enough tour with a decent enough amount of personality that the people on the tour wanted more. And so then the visitor center did its regular tour system. They did it for about 4 years. It was every Saturday and Sunday in February and March. And I kind of got an idea that it was a pretty good thing that I was doing, because there was this one couple that from St. Louis, a middle-aged couple from St. Louis. I think they're now passed. And they came to 3 consecutive years of tours. Same thing over and over again. They wanted to see this 3 consecutive tours. And the visitor center was very good about getting publicity. I had a broadcaster from Australian Broadcasting Company come on a tour and tape that, and it appeared on the BBC World Service. And I not only did I hear it, people that I went to high school with heard it, and they were fascinated by it. And then, but this one time, I remember I was so sick. I'd spoken in Cincinnati at a presentation the previous night. I drove through Indiana half asleep, because I had a tour the next day that I had to be there for. And I came into the tour and I was not feeling well at all. It was a drizzly, rainy, mid-February day. And that day, Business Week was supposed to come in, and they were going to photograph us. It was a full motor coach. And I don't know if you've ever been in a full motor coach. Full motor coaches get this nice, good steaming up of windows like you just wouldn't believe, no matter what the temperature is inside when it's overcast and rainy, and nobody could see anything I was talking about. And so I was getting kind of frustrated, and the Business Week photographer was getting a bit frustrated. And so when we got to the Lovejoy Monument, I said to the group, I know I have a presentation that I will give, that I usually give at the grave. Do you want me to give it at the grave, or do you want to give it in here? He said, give it in here. We were kind of chiselly and tired. Let's get here and here. And so I gave him the presentation on Elijah Lovejoy. And that presentation takes 40 minutes. Wow. And I said at the end of it, now I see some of you have cameras. Those of you who wish to have cameras, we will step out. I will take you to the grave. You can take pictures and we'll walk back. If you don't want to step out to the grave, just stand here. You won't miss anything. All 47 passengers came off that motor coach with umbrellas. The Business Week photographer came off. During my entire presentation, he forgot to take any pictures. And the same thing happens when we go to the Lovejoy grave, even today. Mm-hmm. There's absolute silence. Mm-hmm. Absolute silence.
Well, I want to kind of dig into that, because, I started off, I think because of my love of history, just smiling, and the work that you do touches so many people. But there's clearly when we're talking about the Underground Railroad and slavery, a very real, emotional, sobering, somber. There's other elements to that. And so I want to talk about that. I know you've picked out some places that people may know about, may not know about, as well as some figures. And I was just curious, once you're on these tours and you get into these details. For example, you had mentioned when we were setting up this interview, the Bernard Lynch slave trading warehouse. Yeah. This is on the St. Louis side. And yeah. I mean, when you really get into what stood there, what was there, tell me about this location.
It's gone. Like a lot of other things associated with slavery, we tore it down. We tore it down to put up the arch. We tore it down to put up the office buildings in downtown St. Louis. We tore it down to put up old the Busch Stadium downtown. We tore all that down. Mm. They were old buildings. Mm-hmm. The thing that really bothers me about the Underground Railroad is a lot of the things that I wish I could show people are not there. But there's some things that remain. We are talking about human beings. We're talking about people who had human emotions. As John Kennedy said when he was discussing the possibility of a nuclear test ban treaty with the Soviets, he said, "We all love our children." And these are things that are universal.
Mm-hmm.
That honestly, it does not matter if we're talking about human beings today or human beings back in the 1850s or 1820s. They're very, they had flesh and blood issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I try to do as a person who discusses the Underground Railroad, what I try to do as a member of the faculty teaching history, what I try to do as a writer is I try to remind people we're talking about human beings here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're not slaves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a legal definition.
Mm-hmm.
They're human beings. And in Missouri, the human beings that we're talking about were affected by slavery in a way that is very different than the way human beings were affected by slavery in New Orleans. In New Orleans and in the Delta, your number of slaveholders and your number of slaves were disproportionate. So the type of slavery that existed there was more violent, it was more abusive, it was more designed to instill fear of physical punishment, physical death. Slavery in Missouri, in which the slave population and slaveholder population were roughly equal, were more a situation of family members being held by other family members, or family units being held by family units. Mm-hmm. And so the Negroes who existed in Missouri under slavery had an ability to travel that in many ways facilitated their escape. Mm. For example, all you needed to travel the Mississippi River, if you were a person of West African descent, was a note. That's all you needed. Mm-hmm. And so that note does seem to play a part in the ability to get notes does seem to play a part in facilitating the escape of slaves from downtown St. Louis to downtown Alton. There was a regular running packet called the Altona that was used to facilitate some escapes. Mm. On the Alton waterfront, most of the stevedores were Negroes. They were free blacks who lived in the Hunterstown community. Mm. And these free blacks would help facilitate escape. The person, Isaac Kelly, who was a Prince Hall Mason, one of the founders of the Prince Hall Masons, leader of Union Baptist Church in Alton, he was a barber who lived in Middletown in Alton, and his barber shop was on the waterfront. Mm-hmm. So he apparently facilitated the escape of slaves very easily. It was a very easily done thing that was done by human beings.
Yes.
These were done by these were people who were scared like everybody else.
Absolutely. And I know, so we can get sometimes so caught up in when you're learning history about the sites and the dates and these figures, but lose that human element. There's so much I want to cover with you. We have to take a short break.
As much as I would love to have all the sites available, it's not the sites that are that important. It's not the sites we try to remember.
Right.
We try to remind people we actually need to remember the human beings who are here.
No, that's such a good point. We're going to take a quick break, and that's a great point to end on. We're going to have more information right up on your screen right now. You're getting some information on how you can reach out to Professor Robinson to do his tours. You can do one-on-one booking independent tours, or you can wait till later on this fall. We've got those details on the screen for you with the full page graphic. But don't go anywhere. I wish we could have 2 hours with Professor Robinson, but we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Stay with us.
many reasons to love St. Louis, you can't pick just one.
What I love about St. Louis is the 79 unique neighborhoods and 108 beautiful city parks, including Forest Park, which is actually larger than Central Park in New York, and the gorgeous Tower Grove Park right here.
And there's always something new to experience, no matter the time of day or the season. So come and experience St. Louis.
Hi, I'm Sarah Thompson, and welcome back to City Corner. It's Black History Month, and it's great to be able to dedicate this City Corner to talking with historian J. Eric Robinson. He's a professor of history, assistant professor of history at University of Health Sciences and Pharmacy in St. Louis, which is formerly the St. Louis College of Pharmacy. As I keep saying, I wish I had more time to speak with you because the insight and information that you have is fascinating. The tours that you lead.
Well, you come to my tour, I'll have a full 2 hours of your time.
I know. I wish I had the camera too to follow you around. You left off on this element where I think that's so important, which is despite us looking at sites and locations and tours, it's really the human story when we're talking about enslaved peoples, that these are people who are humans, have emotions, have feelings. And I want to go back to when we talked about Bernard Lynch's slave trading warehouse, because I had read something, and you can tell me if it's true or not, but that, mothers would be held there with their children and they would separate the children. And there was some story about a little boy separated because he was being sold, separated from his mother. And he was crying so much that they tricked him into saying his mother would go with him, and they inevitably sold her to somewhere else. But I mean, those are the real stories that happen. And as you said, this is just right in downtown St. Louis.
Yes, and oftentimes slave trading in St. Louis involved planters who were down in New Orleans. There was this relationship between planters who are located in New Orleans and Natchez, who had come to St. Louis and buy their slaves, most of whom had originated from, say, Maryland or Virginia. And if you stop to think about how much a human being was worth, I take it. You mentioned that you thought about things since you've become a mother. Is that fairly accurate?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. May I put some words in your mouth?
Sure.
You would probably be worth $1,000. If you are beyond menopause, your price would go down to a couple of hundred. Got the picture?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Somebody like myself would be worth somewhere around $300. Mm-hmm. Now, if you had a child who is a prepubescent, not yet hitting puberty, and especially if it was a girl, her value would go up beyond $1,000. Got the picture? If your child were a boy and a prepubescent, he would not quite be at $1,000. And honestly, for people who bought slaves, what they attempted to do was maximize their purchases by getting slaves who have the possibility of creating more slaves. So women of childbearing age, prepubescent girls, those were the ones who are the greatest value. If a person is not of childbearing age, they are not of considerable value. A young boy might be of value because he might learn a trade. Somebody my age, I'm 55, might not be of that much value because there's no guarantee about how long I would live. It's quite conceivable that I could have diabetes, I could have heart disease, I could have hypertension of some type affecting me, I could have some type of malignancy, and the length of time in which, and I'm also an older man, so I'm probably less able to be directed, less able to be scared. And so the chances are that my useful life with a slaveholder would be about 3 years. So you don't want to spend that money on me. Even though we're talking about human beings, it's sheer economics. No way, no finer point than that. It's as sheer economics as it gets. And when people planned escape, one must remind ourselves that regardless how many, those were real assets that were leaving. To give you an idea about it, a person who was worth about $500, that was about the equivalent of an annual income in the agricultural sector of the United States among free whites in the 1850s. $500. How many of us are willing to lose $20,000 to $30,000 worth of assets? We don't want to. We don't want to.
When you look at Missouri being a slave state and Illinois a free state, and we've got this mighty Mississippi River that separates the two states, and I think back to what that would have been like to have to make a journey at night, crossing the river and getting somewhere. When they get to Alton, or however the means that they are able to escape, when they get to Alton, they're not necessarily safe. Can you explain a bit more about that?
Absolutely not. One must remember, first of all, that in the United States, this is pointed out in the Dred Scott decision by Roger B. Taney. A lot of people critique negatively the legal theory behind Taney's decision in Dred Scott, but it's a valuable decision in that he catalogs the status of Negroes in general in the United States. And the only state in the Union in the 1850s that had absolutely no restriction on Negroes of any kind was Maine. They all had some restriction of free blacks in some form or another. Illinois' free blacks were not free at all. If you were a person who traveled, say, 5 miles from your home, you ran the risk of being picked up by somebody who claimed you were a runaway slave and sold you into slavery. And under Illinois' black codes, a black person could not testify against a white person at all. As the story of Martha Jane Tolton, the mother of Augustus Tolton, the first American priest of West African descent, who grew up in Quincy, would point out, if you were successful enough to escape into free state of Illinois, there was the risk that bounty hunters, and that's what they were essentially, on either side of the river would try to return you to a slaveholder. You're traveling under very, very rough circumstances. If you were lucky enough to get to Chicago, okay, where John Jones could help you. John Jones was the leader of the free black community in Illinois. He was able to get you on a boat that traveled to the Great Lakes and got you to Detroit, where George D. Baptista and the Vigilance Committee associated with Second Baptist Church of Detroit furthered your escape by getting you into Canada. But it was only if you got to Canada. And honestly, a lot of people forget this. The Canadians weren't happy about having American Negroes on their soil either. They were, because it created a big problem for Canada. It's only if you got as far as Canada did you have any semblance of breathing free. Now, there were a lot of reasons. Now, a lot of things facilitated that escape. People like John Anderson, who escaped from Fayette County, Missouri, after murdering a slaveholder during an escape. John Anderson used the names of the people who had held him at one time. He used his former slaveholders' names to facilitate escape. But no, you were running scared all the way through. They played the chase from Midnight Express in your ear all the way through as fast as you could get.
And when you put that into, when you think about your life and living and every night going to bed and every morning waking up and how you were going to eat and provide for yourself and clothe yourself and all of that, to have that constant weight and fear instilled in you day after day, and it's raw, it's painful. Before we wrap things up, you have a book that is coming out, and I wanted you to talk just briefly in the time that we have left a little bit more about it.
Gertrude Bartleby, My Quest. It's about the escape of a woman who claimed to have been the daughter of Henry Clay and a slave. Back in 1853, she gets to Brighton, Illinois, with the help of apparently Isaac Kelly. And she stays the night with Van Arsdale family, a family in Brighton that was facilitating slaves' escape. And in my book, I follow her from the time she was in St. Louis and thinking about her husband who was down in New Orleans, and her son that was somewhere sold in St. Louis. And I follow her all the way to Second Baptist Church in Detroit. Mm. And it's a fun journey. It was fun all the way through. I advise you to read the book, but maybe I'll talk about that next time I visit.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I feel, I feel so conflicted sometimes when we revisit the past. There's something to stress about hope and resilience and powering through. And so, but I also feel a sense of, should I smile when I'm talking to you? Because we're talking about 400 years of such pain. And I know you get into those topics and those areas on the tour, which when we're short on time and I have to wrap means.
Think about this. Mm-hmm. One continent for 400 years sent everything imaginable, and they still did not destroy. That's not a sad topic. That's not sad at all.
No, and that's a really great way to look at it. And it's hard, as I said, because it's how you approach it at different stages, but that's such a good point to end on. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you. I know you are busy, and I know we're in this pandemic and you have so much information, and to try to condense it.
Can I say happy birthday to one person?
Sure.
Happy birthday, Sylvia Flame. I know you're out there somewhere. That was my favorite student, according to some people.
Oh, all right. That's right. Because of course, your class, your students. Well, we're going to put up on the screen very quickly for you. This is a graphic that's got the information. So how you can reach out to Professor Robinson and do tours. You can do tours independently with him. We've got that number 618-462-5590. Or later on this year, late summer, early fall, go to riversandroutes.com. You can discover the Underground Railroad tours throughout Alton with J.E. Robinson Tours and the Great Rivers and Routes Tourism Bureau as well. But book early, because these book out from people all over the country coming here. So book early. And again, that information is on the screen. Thank you at home for watching. Professor Robinson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. And keep it right here on STL TV, Experience St. Louis.